Torch the Tower is a part of the removal spell suite. You mostly want to play this if you're looking to exile. It's a decent cheap removal against these aggro decks as well, but mostly you'd be playing Torch the Tower for like Phoenix and things like that. Bitter Triumph is a great unconditional removal spell. Notably, it kills Planeswalkers. Go for the Throat, which is here as well, is probably a little bit better if you're only worried about creatures, but if you want to make sure that you can take out Planeswalkers as well, Bitter Triumph is probably worth it, even though you have to pay 3 life or discard a card. Heartless Act is very good if you think you're going to be playing against a lot of those 6/6 demons that we are playing. Removing counters from creatures is very powerful. Shieldred's Edict is a pretty good unconditional removal. It's really good against like different token strategies because you can take out their primary like enabler. It's also like can pretty unconditionally kill Planeswalkers as well. Croxa is really good against the slower decks. It'll make them discard a card early on and then can just be a finisher later on. But you have to make sure you're actually playing against these slower decks because it does literally nothing, it feels like, against the faster decks. Reckoner Bankbuster, also pretty good against the slower decks, allows you to draw additional cards. Graveyard Trespasser is awesome graveyard hate, and it allows you to gain a little bit of life and is a creature on a stick that is actually pretty hard for other mid-range decks to handle, so it's really good against graveyard decks and mid-range decks. Unstoppable Slasher is kind of the new hotness in this deck. It's a 3-mana 2/3 with Death Touch. It deals combat damage to a player. They lose half their life rounded up. And when Unstoppable Slasher dies, it had no counters on it, returns to the battlefield tapped under its owner's control with 2 stun counters on it. So it's a very hard to answer creature. Has Death Touch, so it's really hard to block, especially since it comes back when people block it. And when it deals damage, they lose half their life total. Rounded up. So it can deal an absurd amount of damage if people let it through. And a lot of people are playing up to 4 of these cards in the deck and just jamming in with Unstoppable Slasher, which is pretty sweet. 2 Lilianas in case you're worried about control or the Enmatic deck or something like that. Kolaghan's Command, again, it's a lot of utility, mostly good against the slower decks because you can make them discard, remove something, get a creature from your graveyard to your hand. And Shieldred is slowly getting back into favor against these like up the beanstalk decks and stuff like that, and Treasure Cruise and whatever. Now you're going to be picking 9 of these lands and 8 of these other cards to add to your no flex slots in the deck, which is a lot of decisions to be made, actually. And it's kind of cool that a deck like this has a ton of freedom, frankly.